Hello and welcome once again to the High Performance Human Podcast. It's your man Andy here, and I am delighted to be joined today by a chap who I consider a friend first and foremost. But Stephen Carroll is one of the most influential voices within the world of real estate, especially when it pertains to the likes of media. He shares his insights from being in three different global media giants and brings a lot of that knowledge to the benefit of so many people that really don't know how to navigate that in very, very complex arena of media. He's very, very knowledgeable around that. Aside from anything else, though, he is just an incredible giver of time and energy. He puts together a bike ride for Hands Across the Water, which helps to raise money for children that are really struggling over in Thailand with regards to schooling and education and getting them off the streets and away from horrible, horrible consequences of being orphans and whatnot. He is the founder and CEO of Digital Live. He's been a general manager of real estate franchises. He's also been a director of industry relations at realestate.com.au. And before that, he's pretty much been anywhere that you would want to be in terms of the media landscape. Steve Carroll, it's an absolute delight to have you on, my man. Welcome to you. How are you?
I'm very well, Andy. I think you call me Stephen, and the only person who ever calls me Stephen is my mother, and she only calls me Stephen when she's a bit angry with me. But Stephen or Steve will go. But great to be here today with you, mate.
Well, I was just reading I was reading off the top of your LinkedIn, but when I saw Stephen, actually, I was like, it actually reminded me of when my old man used to call me Andrew for the exact same reasons, right? For the exact same reasons. Steve, it's I've really, really been looking forward to having you on. I mean, one of the reasons why it's taken a while to get Steve on is because of the fact that he's been away in England. I've been away in England. We've been, as you can tell, we're both of a foreign accent. If you're hearing this in Australia, we're both from the UK. And Steve is, we've just been chatting offline beforehand, and Steve is at that point in his life where he's really got an opportunity to explore things for himself, for him and his beloved better half as well. And having had three kids that have all moved on and onto big and bold things, which is amazing. But Steve, one of the reasons why I'm really keen to have you on is because, as I've mentioned to Steve before we kicked off, and I don't know if I mentioned it to him before, when he was in the role of Director of Industry Relations at realestate.com.au, to put a bit of context around Steve, he came into that role at a time when realestate.com.au was one of the most detested brands within the real estate industry, I think it's safe to say. And the reason for that, gang, for those of you that aren't in real estate, is because realestate.com.au is the major platform, the biggest portal for real estate transactions in Australia. And there was a concern growing within the industry that they had garnered too much power, shall we call it, without getting too political about the whole thing. And Steve was basically given, well, someone could describe it as a bit of a poison chalice. And what he ended up managing to do was turn a bunch of very headstrong industry disbelievers into an industry that actually thought, you know what, maybe there are some people that have got the best intentions to want to create decent relationships, and that is an absolute testament to the power of the chap that we've got on the episode today. So, Steve, before we crack on though, and really dig into yourself and some of your thoughts around high performance, give everybody a bit of an elevator pitch as to who you are and what got you to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I've been helping real estate agents and property managers and real estate leaders since the turn of this century. So, year 2000, which makes me sound incredibly old. I've been helping agents and real estate professionals navigate this sort of digital space that has really gone forward over the last decade or so. And I remember being in the north of England in 1999, year 2000, talking to crusty real estate owners who were in their 50s, trying to explain to them there was this thing coming called the internet. Well, the internet had already arrived, but what I was trying to explain to them is they needed to start thinking about the internet more, because the days of newspapers were going to disappear. And you can imagine me at 37, 38 years of age talking to these crusty 55-year-old, 60-year-old leaders about the internet. And I would have all sorts of sarcastic comments like, well, what day does the internet get published, Steve? And someone up in Scarborough, North Yorkshire, said, will I be able to wrap my fish and chips in this thing called the internet that you're waffling on about, Steve? And so I've been doing that since, as I say, the end of last century, the beginning of this century. And then News Corp in 2006 here in Australia thought that I had something that could help them here. And they agreed to sponsor me and the whole family. We came over to Australia in 2006. And the intention was to stay for 4 years, Andy. We're still here now, and it's 2024. And obviously that journey took me through 4 years working at News Corp, dealing with their huge real estate sections, 10 years at REA, as you quite beautifully explained, 8 years as sales director, 2 years in an industry relations role. And then the other thing that I do when I've got a bit of spare time is I get shit done for charity. I like to describe it as a charity doer. And I rally the real estate industry once every year, and we go off to Thailand and we do a bike ride. We end up in an orphanage, meet loads of kids that we're fundraising for. And we've collected about $2 million since we launched the first bike ride in 2019, so just a year before COVID. So if it wasn't for COVID, we'd probably be sitting at 4 mil, but we'll take 2 million, Andy.
It's not small change, let's put it that way. That's for sure. Steve, there's so many questions I want to ask, just with regards to your background. But before I go into that, what is it within you as a character, as a personality, that you feel drove you to take on a charitable cause like Hands Across the Water, which is the charity that Steve associates with and does these bike rides through and whatnot? What is it within your personality that made you go, fuck it, I need to do that? Because you can't just want to do it. You kind of need to do something as big as that.
Well, there were two reasons. Probably three reasons. So the first reason was I was working with a lady called Claire Baines at realestate.com.au, and she introduced me to her husband, Peter Baines, who was a forensic police officer and led the Australian response to the tsunami in 2004. And I was so inspired by his story of work, and I just felt as though I needed to give Peter a helping hand, because I knew that I had the influence to rally the real estate industry that we're in. So that's number one. Second reason, going back to REA, I wanted to try and put a human side to this organization called realestate.com.au. You used the word detested. It was challenging because we didn't have many fans working in real estate, and that made it a tough gig. And I wanted to try and humanize some of the leaders, well, myself really, and others. And half a dozen of us from realestate.com.au put our hands up and said, we'll go and do a ride. And then the third thing, which is a pretty personal thing, which I very rarely talk about, but my younger brother, he lost his son age 16 and to cancer. And I felt as though I probably needed to do something. And so when you roll those three things together, that launched the Digital Live bike ride. And I'm really motivated by the fact that we've got close to 60 people from our industry going over to Thailand next February. And yeah, look, as long as I've got the motivation and the fitness and the health, we're going to continue with it, Andy.
Which is incredible. And I love, all those reasons are incredibly valid and very well, very, very well thought and what have you. But you've been removed from realestate.com.au for a good couple of years now, at least.
Four.
4 years, geez. Um, and yet, and we've been through a pandemic, and yet you are still driven to want to do this and help these people and help these kids and whatnot, right? I mean, it's one of those ones where when you've got motivations that, as well as your own personal motivation, but when you've got motivations like what you did outside of yourself, it's a lot easier to do these things. And the reason why I want to dig into this a little bit is because a lot of people that have got incredible intentions of wanting to do something greater outside of themselves, a lot of the time they generally need something outside of themselves in order to have that motivation to get it done.
Yeah.
You had that, but then for 4 years you've not had that, and yet you still persist with something that would take up so much time and cause so many headaches and would cause numerous rashes in your nethers and all the rest of it. What's making you still do it now?
Look, I have to say that when you work for a big organization like realestate.com.au, it's a comfort blanket that enables you to do things like get the bike ride off the ground. Because obviously I was on stage constantly talking to audiences. I'm in meetings, and I'm representing realestate.com.au, and every single real estate office needed realestate.com.au. So it was relatively easy for me. When I left REA in 2019 to take up another real estate portal job in the Middle East, in Dubai, which unfortunately got cut short because of COVID, I realized that now for me to continue this work, I no longer had the springboard called REA.
Mm.
So I had to do it off my own back, and I had to obviously look at doing things differently. And look, like all of us, Andy, we've all got a few regrets in life, and we've all got a few things that we're incredibly proud of. One of the things I'm very proud of is the fact that I've still been able to remain relevant in this industry, even though I don't, and I'm not attached to a big organization. And that is something that I'm really, really proud of, because at the end of the day, Andy, when I was working at realestate.com.au, I would always question, is this person wanting to have a relationship with me because of Steve Carroll or because of my title?
Yeah.
And there are those people who I know who, as soon as I left REA, no longer wanted to have coffee with me, no longer took my calls, because it wasn't about Steve Carroll, it was about what I represented. And then there are people like yourself and many, many others who see the relationship about Steve Carroll, not realestate.com.au, and can I leverage an advantage if I get to know Steve better. But without question, the job has got harder, but in a bizarre kind of way. And maybe it's the British blood that we have that makes me want to work harder and prove a point that I can do this with or without being part of a big, big, big organization.
That's basically code, everybody, for your notes, as British blokes are generally pretty stubborn in essence within our DNA. We don't like to give up on stuff too easily. So that's basically something for your notes there, that if you meet a British person, get ready, because the chances are we're going to have the bit between the teeth about something. So I want to come back to that identity conversation. That for me is going to be a really, really cool conversation for us to have. But before we crack on, there's a question that I ask everybody that comes onto the show, which is what their definition of a high performance human is. Now, I have the belief, as lots of you will know now, success, connection, influence, and happiness are the four elements to going into creating a high performance. And they live in an ecosystem where one cannot survive without the other. Steve Carroll, put you on the spot. What is your definition of a high performance human?
I want to take you back to 2005, and it was a pretty normal Thursday in the UK. And I was on a train going down to King's Cross. I had a couple of meetings down there. And I'd arrived in King's Cross hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But this particular Thursday back in July 2005 felt different. And it felt different, Andy, because when I got off the train, there looked to be, to me, an air of concern, an air of panic. People seemed to be walking a bit faster than they normally walk. There was also a larger police presence on this morning back in 2005. As I approached the tube station, I noticed that the tube station at King's Cross was closed, which was very, very unusual. And so along with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other commuters, I started walking up to Euston, which is about 1 kilometre away. And just as I got to Euston train station, for whatever reason, I saw this double-decker red bus, which London is famous for. And for whatever reason, Andy, my eyes followed this bus. And this bus, which was absolutely jam-packed, went about 100 metres to my left. And then suddenly, the bus exploded. The roof of the bus went up in flames. There was smoke, and then there was this real eerie silence. And what I noticed, Andy, there was 3 different responses from the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were outside of the bus. So response 1 was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of commuters just in a direction away from the bus ran. The bus is on fire, there's smoke. Clearly, this is not normal. Response number 2, which was the response that I took, was I just stood in absolute shock and awe, thinking, what the hell has just happened? 100 meters away from us. And clearly, there are people in that bus that are not going to get out of that bus alive. And the third response, which was one person, just one person, a lone policewoman, aged 23, 24, looked to me as though she'd probably just graduated, ran towards the bus. That was the third response. When I think about that, and you ask me the question, high performance, I reckon high performance is doing your very best job and remembering your purpose when the pressure stakes are at an all-time high. And what this policewoman did, aged 23, 24, no older than that, she ran towards the bus because that was her job. That was the purpose. That was what she was taught to do at the police academy, to go and help others. And although everybody else was running in the opposite direction, she knew that wasn't the job she needed to do. That's high performance, Andy. And you know what? I'd love to meet this police lady to hear her story on why she did what she did, why she didn't hesitate. That is high performance, mate. And that was just, Andy, for the context of the audience, that was the day that the terrorist group Al-Qaeda decided to bomb the London Underground and target a couple of double-decker buses full of families and workers going to work. That day, I think 66 people lost their lives. Hundreds of people were maimed forever, lost arms and legs, and 100 will have that scar even today in 2024. And that's just to, I suppose, round round up the context of that story, mate.
That is honestly, that's honestly speaking, that of all the definitions that we've had on the show so far, that is the first one that's been told through a story. And as I'm sure you can feel yourselves, team, as you listen to Steve describe what went on at seven on the 7th of July, 2020, 2005, the visceral response that you will be having and feeling right now is essentially the visceral feeling that ideally and the end game is allowing you to feel what a high performance human is. And that is just that has just brought that to the show in a beautifully horrific, significant way. Steve was there on the ground. I mean, I wasn't there, but I definitely remember where I was because my mum had literally a month before had taken up a role in anti-terrorism intelligence in London, and all the phones went down. For those of you that weren't there, that weren't in the UK at the time, the phones went down. No one could you couldn't get hold of anybody down in London. Mobile services were down, and it was crazy because the Ashes were on at the time as well, and I remember I was watching the TV. I was for some reason I wasn't working at that point, or my shift wasn't on. I had some time off, and the 2 hours that I couldn't get hold of my mom were fairly significant, and they felt a lot longer than 2 hours. I'd say that for him for nothing. What an incredibly powerful way to describe high performance. Yang, please rewind this and re-listen to that because that is exactly what high performance human is. Thank you for that. That's amazing. That's a gift. And I really appreciate that. That is a real gift.
One of the things I remember about that day was there were 16 of us working for the same company, and we were stranded in London because, as you say, the phone network was taken off air because clearly it was a security risk allowing terrorists to talk to each other. Every single hotel got booked up just like that, and there were 16 of us, including me, and we're all dotted in different parts of the London. And we just accepted that we were going to have to wait, probably sleep on a hotel floor until the next day. And my big boss, so not the person I reported to, but the big boss, he hired 16 motorcyclists to come to London to take 16 of his staff out of the danger area because we didn't know what was going to happen. And the interesting thing was that I'd never been on a motorbike before, let alone being a pillion on one. And these 16 riders came down, and one obviously found me, had a set of leathers, and trying to get out of London, it was complete mayhem. And I remember a few days later asking the big boss why he did that. And he said to me, and I always remember this, he said to me, you know what, Steve, I've always believed that if as a leader, you look after your people, whatever situation they're in, if you look after your people, they will always look after the best interest of the company. And I always remember that. And I think that's absolutely amazing because here I am 20 years later, picturing this leader in my mind, thinking what a great leader of people he was. And hiring 15 motorcyclists probably cost him, let's say, £5,000. But I tell you now, he did that from the heart, but he did that also because he knew that would be an amazing investment of 5,000. And here I am still lauding that brilliant piece of leadership from the big boss.
And that's a significant point that I'd like to. In fact, we'll dig into that now because when it comes to leadership, when you are looking at running a business, or even it doesn't even need to be a business, a group of people, right? Whether it's sport, business, community, whatever. Leadership has inherently, they always have inherent flashpoints whereby the decision is short-term metrics or short-term gain versus long-term perspective, long-term legacy. And I've been privy to two fairly significant flashpoints like this, whereby one whereby decisions were made for short-term economic benefit that I know are going to hamper them long-term from a legacy point of view. All right. It's very, very easy when you're not in one of these situations to talk from the sidelines. It's easy to shout from the sidelines when it comes to all this sort of stuff. But Steve, in your opinion, when it comes to that leader that you talk about just there, what do you think it was within his character, or within his leadership? What were the ingredients within his leadership or within his persona that made that such an instinctive reaction?
I think that the company I was working for at the time was the biggest media company in Europe, but it always felt like a family.
Mm,
And I think that in answer to your question, I think that he saw it as 16 family members stuck in London with a lot of uncertainty,
mm,
where the hospitals were overflowing. There was rumors of a further terrorist attack. He saw 16 family members that he needed at all costs. Now, you couldn't drive into London.
no.
So he couldn't send a taxi or whatever, because London had a ring of steel around it. No one was getting in and no one was getting out.
Mm,
So the only way of working that is really to cheat the system and get motorcyclists to do the deed.
mm,
And I think that when I look back on my career of working for three huge international media giants, the culture at EMAP back in the UK was probably the closest you got to real family. Everybody talks about, it's family, it's this, it's that, but a lot of that's just fluff and bullshit. I
100%.
think that EMAP, through whatever means, through the way that the leadership was conducted, had probably created the closest to that family unit. And I'm
Mm.
still in touch with him. I'm still in touch with the motorcyclist, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
A guy called Paul Hood, who works at News Corp now in Tower Bridge. And
Right.
and I still talk to him about that 80-mile drive back on the back of his Honda 750 back to Peterborough. That was probably one of the most frightening experiences of the whole day, to be honest with you. But
I
anyway,
bet, I bet it was. I bet it
yeah,
was trying to navigate a motorway on the back of a motorbike when you've
yeah.
never been on one. Yeah, for sure. Um, that's really interesting that you talk about it being close to family. I'm really glad that you made that distinction. That there's so much of it is just BS. It's just fluff. It's jargon for the sake of jargon. In terms of trying to define culture and all this sort of stuff. When it yeah, when it pertains to the this whole notion of what it takes in order to create a dynamic of that sort of nature. I think one thing that you very cleverly pointed out there that I think needs to be highlighted is that your leader was unashamed in saying, right, I need to get 16 family members out of London, but I also can vindicate it economically speaking, because I see that $5,000 in hiring the 16 motorbike riders. I can see I can see that this is going to be a sound investment when it comes to the future payback that I will receive in attitude, behavior, effort, all that sort of stuff coming back from those 16 people that felt loved and valued at that one particular time.
Yeah.
Do you think that that is where there's a huge disconnect between the people that say and the people that do, is the fact that they struggle to see that perspective of the fact that economically speaking, this short-term investment of X amount of dollars into the life and health and well-being of my people is going to get, because it's not on a P&L, right? And a lot of leaders struggle to see past the black and white of a P&L.
Yeah. And that's that's just the pressure that leaders face today.
Mm,
And so I'm not making any excuse for those leaders that say the right things, but their action don't follow what they say. I'm actually giving them a cop out or an excuse by saying, business is tough. There's a lot of pressure on leaders to deliver shareholder value or to hit targets. So
mm,
often doing the real right things becomes secondary. But just to round that particular conversation out, a year later, a year and a half later, I got headhunted for this job at News Corp. And it was one of the toughest things that I had to do because I had to go and resign from a company that had gone to extreme measures to make sure that I got returned to, my wife, three kids, and so on and so forth. But I tell you what I did do. I had 3 months' notice to work. We all have notice periods because of the role, the seniority of the role I had in the UK was 3 months. I worked every single one of those days and gave 110% every single one of those days.
mm,
That was the payback. I like to think, and I don't think it ever boiled down to the 5,000 cost, and I don't think that was the main driver for the decision of sending these bike riders down. I think the main driver was that family piece I taught. But I
mm.
tell you what, during those 3 months, I could have sat with my feet up, watching the cricket, doing absolutely nothing. I gave it my very best for 12 weeks. I would have made the company a lot more than 5,000 because of that attitude. And that's playing the long game that
Mm.
so many people talk about.
No, I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. And I think if we can hopefully highlight that perspective a lot more often, it would make those decisions a lot more viable for those people that have got inherent pressures. We
Yeah.
can't, like you said, we can't dismiss financial pressure, right? We can't dismiss that. But when you can see it in that sort of perspective, when the opportunity cost of investing in the humans for whatever reason matches, it can be seen as an investment on a 3x, 4x future within from that person in return. It makes the right decision a lot easier. Um,
100%.
so
100%.
now
Yeah.
I want to come back to something that you mentioned earlier within your own experience, which was the struggle that you had for a time there around identity. Because I think personal identity, I feel, is something that society is really, really struggling with right now. The world is so damn noisy, and especially with certain generations, younger generations who have got various political, humanitarian drums being beaten on a daily basis, X amount of times a day on all their feeds and whatnot. It's becoming increasingly difficult for people to actually be able to hear themselves and their own identity, whether it's through fear of being judged otherwise, or whether it's through extremism from an identity point of view being pumped out there, right? So whether it is, and we're not going to talk about specifics, but whether it is, gender arguments or arguments around war and whose side is right and whose side is wrong and all this sort of stuff. It's very difficult to define yourselves. And then when you bring it more to a micro level, we don't half pin our identity to our job. It's a massive part of our identity. One example that I found was at the start of very, very start of lockdown one of COVID. And it really didn't hit me as to how much we attach ourselves to our work from an identity perspective, because the first night after Scott Morrison, the then PM, brought everybody to a lockdown, the number of phone calls I had from sales agents who would, until that point, be made of Teflon. Nothing stuck. And then as soon as their identity, as soon as their role had been effectively put ground to a halt, they were calling me in a panic because they didn't know almost who they were within this period of the world, right? Talk to me in terms of your experience when you first noticed this, are they wanting to know me or are they wanting to know my position, and how that initially manifested within you?
Yeah. Look, I'll be really honest with you. I was I was someone who expected to get, and had for many, 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 many years, get 200 emails a day,
Mm,
get 15 to 20 text messages a day, to get 15 to 40 phone calls a day. And when suddenly that all stops and you're looking at your inbox and you've got two emails and one's from your mum,
mm,
and no one rings you and no one texts you, um, it really, really kicks your confidence in the teeth.
mm,
And there were days where I would go into complete into the doldrums, and feel as though I'd lost my identity. I was no longer important. I probably needed to accept the fact that my relevance had disappeared. And so yeah, absolutely. And so you what I did was I would talk to people. I'd talk to my wife. I would share that experience. I'd listen to positive podcasts. I'd read books, and you rewrite the rule book. And 4 years on, I still have days like that where I look at things, and I don't feel good about myself.
mm,
But there are more days where I think, do you know what? I can make a real difference, and I'm very relevant, and I should be very grateful for that. And going back to what we were talking about 25 minutes ago, Peter Baines will often say, you cannot control what has happened. You can't control what has happened, but what you can do is you can influence what happens next.
mm,
And, I couldn't control my departure from REA. I couldn't control my new job in Dubai working for Property Finder and the fact that it ended prematurely because of COVID. That was all
mm,
out of my hands. But what I could do is influence what happens next. And I took a lot of solace and a lot of focus and happiness from the bike ride. And
mm.
that really is why I keep going, and will continue to keep going. So don't know if that answers your question, but it wasn't easy, mate.
No,
It wasn't easy.
it wouldn't have been. What do you think it was within your identity when all those phone calls stopped and the emails stopped? What elements of your identity did you really bring into were really brought into question for you personally? Because the reason why I want to dig into this is because I do feel that if we can bring a strength and a resolve to our own identity, then not only will it make us feel a lot more confident inside work, outside work, with whatever it is we're doing, it will allow us to operate with a greater degree of freedom, knowing that we are a lot more sure of who we are within ourselves, right?
Yeah.
There's a study that was done in 1971 called, and it was all around self-determination theory, SDT. And it was all about internal motivation and how you can generate momentum from within yourself, right? And I think that when in its sort of identity for me ties in with motivation, because
Yeah.
if you are sure about yourself and and you know you are and you're confident in your DNA and all that sort of jazz, it's not difficult to get yourself up and about, right? It wouldn't be. Whereas a lot of us, and we all do, we all struggle with this shit from time to time. A lot of us struggle to get motivated to get out of bed sometimes, or crack on. For example, if we haven't got 50 calls coming in and 200 emails and we're not feeling wanted and loved and all that sort of jazz, we haven't got validation. So what was it that you really had to bring into question, and how did you, whether it was through your wife or your own personal work, what is it that you felt you needed to strengthen within your own identity?
Yeah, it's a good question. So resilience is one area that, I really, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, well, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much resilience am I showing right now?
Mm,
And if it's a 6, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to change to take it to a 7 or 8? Or who do I need to speak to help me move from a 6 or to a 7 to an 8? Now, what you don't want to do, Andy, is you don't want to go and talk to people who are going to say to you, "Oh, poor you, you're so unlucky. I can't
mm,
believe that REA made you redundant after 10 years. I can't believe the Dubai job fell apart for you because of COVID." Because all you do by hanging around with people who give you that feedback is you just feel worse because they're actually putting fuel on your beliefs. You actually need to talk to people who ask you the challenging questions along the lines of what are the 3 things that you can do that will make a difference. Now, interestingly, Andy, one of the things that was really important for me was to get a date for the next bike ride, and that was really hard because I left REA in December
mm,
2019. We went into COVID in March, and then the world was in this world of uncertainty. So, what one of the things that was really, really important for me was to actually get a date in the diary to say, right, this is going to be when the next bike ride is. Yeah.
mm,
Because having something concrete, something that I could then ring people and say, hey, we're going to do this bike ride in March 2021. Do you want to come? Also, it gave me a motivation to stay fit. So
mm.
you had to have some sort of target. So that was probably one of the of 2 or 3 strategies that I was coached on to do. Now, as it happened, we didn't do a ride in March 2021 because COVID was still COVID,
Mm.
but we pushed it back by 6 months. But the whole purpose of having something concrete to go after really, 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 really helped.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about resilience, and it's also, it's also about looking at people who have done amazing things and asking yourself, what can I take from that? Let me tell you a quick story. So, next year, when we do this bike ride, we will end up at an orphanage that is run by a guy called Game. And Game is about 30, our Game would be in his 30s, I would guess. Let me just tell you the story about Game. So, Game at the age of 5 lost all of his family because of the Boxing Day tsunami. All of his family, his mum, his dad, his brother, his sister. The only surviving relative was his uncle, who was actually quite a mean uncle.
Mm.
And the uncle allowed Game to stay until he was about 13. And then at 13, told Game that he needed to start bringing money into the family. Otherwise, he'd have to find another home. And anyway, Game spent a fair bit of time on the streets of Thailand. Fast forward to last year, he just got his master's and PhD at ANU, Australian National University, one of the top universities in the world. In fact,
Mm.
he now manages one of the orphanages because although he's qualified to go and do amazing things wherever he wants to go, he's gone back to his roots to help kids like him when he was 5. And so I reflect on those stories that I have learned and seen, and we'll meet Game that when we ride into this orphanage, riders will meet Game and will hear his story. And I look at that and I go, okay, what can I take from that? What can I learn from that? And it's easy to have thoughts. Well, you're not comparing apples with apples, or it's different, or
Mm.
bullshit. There's a lot of similarity, and you've got to be brave enough to take some of those learnings and accept them and put them into your own DNA.
Mm.
The most important thing, Andy, is you've got to continue to talk to people and continue to speak to the right people, the people who are going to help you move forward.
Love it. Now, before I let you go, I want to dig into your your well of knowledge around the digital media landscape, and just ask you. And let's just get technical. Let's get practical. So we've done a lot of. There's been a lot of heavy talk going on in this episode, more than I was expecting to. But I actually think I actually think that this has been one of the best episodes to date, for a number of reasons. And I want to dig into your professional brain now, because moving forward, obviously the digital landscape, especially, you know, all of the noise around artificial intelligence and the importance of it and all the rest of it. I really want to get your take on how you see the next 12 months, 12 to 24 months, because you put up a slide that was really, really cool at Elite Retreat, which was a conference that Steve emceed. I did a charity auction for, run by Sam McLean, Mark Edwards, and the team at Elite Agent Magazine there. It was an incredible event, loved it. But there was one slide that you put up, which was a slide of a building that had the banner on it that said, this can't be built, basically words to the effect of, this can't be built by AI, right? Or words to the effect of. So what's your take on the landscape for the next 12 to 24 months? Because you look at the likes of Nvidia has just taken $1 trillion hit on its valuation.
Yeah.
Because people are starting to go, is AI gonna be the be all and end all, or is it a little bit faddish or whatever? So give us your top 2 or 3 takes for the next 12.
Yeah, okay. I just want to acknowledge a guy called Adam Graver, who is probably going to listen to this podcast. He works in real estate in the UK, up in York, beautiful York, and he showed me that that billboard which was plastered on the side of a building. And I do want to make sure I acknowledge Adam for sharing that. But basically, what that billboard said, and it was a huge building that had got this great add-on, and the advertisement basically said, "Come on, ChatGPT, if you're that smart, you finish building this building."
Amazing.
And of course, the ad was actually a recruitment ad, looking for highly skilled builders and like. And what the billboard very cleverly said was, you might be that smart, ChatGPT, you might be able to do this and do that, but you cannot finish off this building that needs to be completed. And so the context of me showing that at Elite Retreat was basically to say to the audience, let's not get carried away with migrating so much work to technology and AI that it's actually at the expense of the human factor. Because at the end of the day, Andy, we want to buy from people. We want to do business with people that we like. And the way you get to like them is you meet them and you have a coffee with them or a beer with them, or you go and watch the football with them. And so the whole purpose or message I was giving is, yes, you've got to embrace artificial intelligence. Yes, you've got to embrace technology, but never, never, never at the expense of the human factor, because the human factor is still what glues society together and gets people to want to buy from each other. So I think, what I'm seeing really good real estate groups do is invest. So I'll give you an example. So there's a real estate group in London who said to me, for every dollar, not every pound, because it's the UK, every pound we invest into technology and artificial intelligence, this is how we spend that pound. We spend 33 pence of the pound on the software or the hardware. And we spend 67 pence, so two-thirds of it, on our people to get them to embrace, to try, to feel comfortable, to be curious, and so on and so forth. And so, one of the things that I think is very, very important in this world that we're in right now is make sure you bring the people on the journey and you invest in the people. So that's really critical. I think the other thing that's really critical is, you know how on a Saturday night when we sit down and we decide to watch a Netflix movie, and we scroll through those videos, or the covers of the video at breakneck speed, and we go, nah, seen it, nah. Oh, that looks interesting. I click and I find out more. And
Mm.
what I say to real estate agents is that is exactly how consumers today, when they're in search and research mode, find real estate agents. They're flicking at a rapid speed, and your job as a real estate agent is to create a professional profile online that stops that seller scrolling and makes that seller look at you. And
Mm.
there's various things that you can do to make that happen. We haven't got time to go into that right now. So that would be the second thing. And the third and final thing I think of, and I look at the likes of Gavin Rubinstein down at Ray White, and I look at his equivalent in the UK, a guy called Daniel Daggers, who I had the pleasure of meeting, who is the face of Buying London on Netflix.
Mm.
And what I noticed people like Gavin and Daniel do is they are translators of information, not distributors of information online. So let me explain that. If there is a rate cut tomorrow, just for the purpose of this conversation, if you just on your social say stop press, rate cut, blah blah blah, you're actually just distributing information. What really, really good digitally switched on real estate agents do, like Gavin and Daniel and others, is they take that information and they translate it into, well, this is what it means if you're a first time buyer. This is what this news means if you're an investor. This is what this news means if you have a young family. And what these really good agents do is they use digital to help potential customers become future customers. So, in summary, artificial intelligence, I think it's amazing, but never ever at the expense of the human factor. Number two, be a translator of information, not a distributor of information. And if your professional profile online looks like every other real estate agent in the town that you operate, then you're kidding yourself and you're wasting energy having any form of digital strategy. You got to stand out from the crowd, and it is possible to do that. You just got to work at it as you would work at the gym, as you would work at anything you do in life.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And that, and even if you're not in real estate, that could still be very much applicable to pretty much anything that you're looking to do, right? At the end of the day, society, we are very, very superficial in our judgment, particularly when we're in consumer mode, right? So the Netflix example is absolutely spot on, and we all do that. But we are so quick to pass judgment. I've referred to it in the past as headline readers. We tend to make a judgment based off a headline as opposed to the context of a conversation or of an article. But we can't just bemoan that fact about society. We need to be able to work to that fact within society so that we can then enact change based on our belief system. But we need to make sure that we play the game in order to be able to be heard. And that is society's game. So
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'll just finish off with a story that I picked up from my 4 or 5 months in the UK recently. I met some fascinating business leaders in and out of real estate, but I caught up with an old friend of mine who used to work in the marketing department at Harrods,
mm,
the very expensive store in London where I know you buy all your suits from.
I wish.
And she was saying to me that one of the most stressful times working at Harrods was the lead up to Christmas and getting the shop window right. And
Mm,
I said to Camla, tell me more. She said, well, Mr. Fayad, so Dodi's father, who has since passed away but owned Harrods, around about October, he would compare the shop window of Harrods to all the other superstores in London, Selfridges, and. And he wanted to make sure that the front window of Harrods was the best in the capital city because his theory was consumers, as they're walking in droves down Regent Street and the big high streets, are influenced by shop windows.
mm,
And if the shop window looks appealing, they're going to go in
mhm,
and shop. And if the shop window looks boring and like every other shop window, they're just going to continue to walk by because, like real estate, shoppers in London have a lot of choice.
mm.
And so I say to real estate agents and real estate businesses, your digital shop window is and the quality of it is going to be the difference between people being curious and looking further and just passing by and walking on to someone else.
Amazing.
And I love that story because that I think is a key focus area for all business owners in the UK, in Australia, in the UK, wherever they're doing real estate, Andy.
100%. 100%. Steve, this has been one of the best conversations by a distance. I can't thank you enough for your time and your candor, and allowing me to dig into a bit more of a personal side of Steve Carroll. Really, really appreciated that. Mate, just to round off, we always ask one final question.
Yeah.
We're all after a better version of ourselves. We're all trying to achieve what we perceive as the next level of high performance for ourselves. And as a result of that, there's always things that we've got to work on. Within yourself going forward for the next 12 months, what is one thing that you are working on within yourself or that you would like to get better at within yourself?
Consistency and consistency around self-belief.
Mm,
So I'll be honest, like people see me on stage, people see me at conferences, and people probably think this Steve Carroll guy, what's he smoking? He's always always comes over motivated and passionate. I tell you, Andy, it's not like that, right?
no.
Every single week there are times where I just start to question myself. And so, in answer to your question, it's about being consistent and having self-belief about you more and more and more and more. And one of the things I visualize in my mind is, you know how when you delete emails or you're on your mobile phone, there's that rubbish bin and you can drop things into the bin.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the things that I often do is, if I'm having a thought that's a negative thought that's not giving me not helping me, giving me any value whatsoever, I mentally visualize picking that thought up and putting it into the trash bin on your phone, and getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've got to work on, because I'm not outstanding at it, and I've got to get better.
I love it. And that is something that I think we can all do with a little bit more of consistent self-belief. I think is something that we'd all appreciate. I think right now, Steve Carroll, thank you so much. This has been. I knew it was going to be good. I didn't know it was going to be this good.
Great,
And
Andy.
and of
And can I just give a plug to two things?
course
So,
you can. Of course you can.
if anybody wants to ride with me in Thailand, you don't have a lot of time to make a commitment, but get in touch with me. And look, if you think that I can help you, not you, Andy, but your audience in any way in some of the stuff I've been talking about, give me a call, because I'm a consultant now, and like all consultants, Andy, we're always looking for work, mate.
100%. And on that team, we'll make sure, obviously, that we'll put all of the links to Steve and the great work that he does with his digital live bike ride and all of his consulting work. We'll make sure we put links to all of that, as well as all of his social media stuff, into the show notes. So the next thing you should be doing after listening to this is going onto those show notes and connecting with Steve, because he's well worth connecting with. He's one of the most connected people going around, but not just talking about the people that he has within his networks. He's so connected to everything that's going on in the world. He's just a guy that's worth knowing. So, team, Steve, sorry, thank you so much for joining us on the High Performance Human podcast. It's been an absolute delight. I knew it would be. I'm so glad that we've had a chance to have a good yarn on here. Team, on behalf of Steve and myself, stay safe, healthy, happy. Look after yourselves and each other. I'm sure you would have got loads of notes from this one. Make sure you go and rewind yourself back to Steve's definition of a high performance human and just let that one sink in. Until next time, gang, take care.